Today I'm sharing my unpopular opinions and hot takes on fragrances and the industry in general. This is a fun, lighthearted video, and it's not the first time I've done a video like this. A lot of you seem to really enjoy whenever I do this kind of content because it's a fun way for us to discuss and talk about fragrances in a more objective way. If this is your first time on this channel, hello, my name is Anya. I absolutely love fragrances and I talk about them here 5 times a week, Monday through Friday. I also do additional content on TikTok and Instagram under the username ANECHKAFRAGRANCES. I also recently launched a podcast called The Fragrance Report. New episodes come out every single Wednesday. Right now, it's only available on Spotify, but I am working to get it available everywhere else. So if you're interested, do consider watching or listening to me on there as well. Alright, so some of these opinions are a little bit more tame than others, but with all of these, rest assured this is my own personal opinion. I'm not trying to force my opinion onto you. I'm just sharing my opinion. And if you disagree, that is totally fine. We can have a healthy discussion in the comments, but please don't take any of this personally. So the first point is if you are a fragrance brand and you have expensive / polarizing scents, discovery sets or samples should be readily available. There are some brands out there that will literally send you a free sample if you just pay for shipping. Pernoire, for example, is one of them. I think that's a fantastic way to introduce your fragrance to your audience in an easily accessible manner. I think that's great. However, some other brands that I've also encountered often are known for their polarizing fragrances, and they don't make it that easy for the customer to try the fragrance without blind buying it. Fragrance notes online can only tell you one thing, but if your brand is literally known for creating polarizing fragrances, I do think it's in your best interest as a brand to make your fragrances as accessible as possible. And there are some brands out there, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, there are some brands out there that will literally charge a little bit too much for the discovery set. In my opinion, if you are selling your customer samples, it should not be anywhere close to $100, even if it is a discovery set, because you can't tell me that the cost of producing that discovery set was anywhere close to $100 if you're charging, let's just say, $200 to $300 for your fragrances full size. And I don't care what anyone says, samples can sometimes be a little bit difficult to test with. And that's why whenever I'm testing new fragrances, I always try to go for decants, because with the decants, you can overspray, you can test out the sillage, you can really get an experience. Whereas with the samples, you never really know how it was packaged. If it was packaged in an incorrect way, it might have had a chance to kind of like alter the way the fragrance smells. And also you kind of end up being like very conservative with your sprays. This is just natural. Like I've experienced this with samples myself. I have so many samples that I kind of like only want to spray like once, twice, maybe 3 times at a time because I don't want to run out of them. And that I feel like is a natural inclination when you have a discovery set or when you have samples, and when you have a discovery set that is, from a brand that's charging you like $100 plus, it's not very fair to the consumer. So going back to my previous point, sending out samples for free if you only have to pay for shipping, I think is a really good thing for a customer to have access to. Another thing I really like is when brands really pay a lot of attention to their discovery sets and make their discovery sets a really positive experience for the consumer. I would say Une Nuit Nomade is a great example of this. Their discovery set is literally a work of art, and that's the kind of thing, like it's like $50, by the way, $50 US. You get a voucher. The discovery set in and of itself looks absolutely beautiful. That's the kind of thing that you could gift someone and they would be happy to receive it. Another brand that also does discovery sets really, really well is House of Beau. I love House of Beau because what they do with their discovery sets is, first of all, they have decants of their samples, so you can get 10 milliliter sizes of all their fragrances, and that's like around, I think, $200 to $300. But if you want to be a little bit more budget friendly, you can custom pick the samples, or sorry, the decants that you want to include in your discovery set. You can pick 3 and it will be $98. $98 full price. That is amazing, and that just goes to show how they are thinking about their customer, because they're thinking about the customer experience and they're trying to cater to customer delight, which I think more brands should be doing. And I actually would like to talk about that in again later on in this video, customer delight, but something that I also really do think brands should be doing, which kind of relates to my first point, is making decants more accessible. We don't want samples, we want decants. We want that to be easily accessible to the consumer. Again, I do want to shout out Une Nuit Nomade. Une Nuit Nomade, they have an amazing method when it comes to making decants available to their customers. They're really affordably priced. They're fairly priced. And I do have a code available for Une Nuit Nomade, by the way, but I've loved them for years. I've bought most of my fragrances from Une Nuit Nomade myself. And I think if you're looking for something that's accessible, a brand that really caters to the customer, that's an example of a brand that does just that. So another thing that I want to talk about, actually, if we're talking about catering to the customer, is customer delight, because I am seeing a lot of brands kind of deviate from this, especially in the social media space. I think we're starting to see a little bit of a disconnect between certain brands, not all brands, but certain brands and their consumers, because they're not focusing as much on customer delight. What is customer delight? This is like my marketing side coming out. Because I'm in marketing, I do this for a living. What is customer delight? Customer delight is when a customer is not only satisfied but delighted with your product. They're delighted by your service. They're like, wow, this is amazing. I feel special. I feel heard. Thank you so much. That's customer delight. Not customer delight, or the opposite of that, is, a disappointed customer. But also something that cannot be overlooked is when a customer has paid for a product and they're like, okay, yeah, it's fine, but they're not delighted. So I'm not saying that every single customer is right. I worked in retail. The customer is not always right. In fact, a lot of times they are wrong. But I do think that a lot of, how do I say this? A lot of brands in the luxury space, and I don't think this is only explicitly just for fragrances, a lot of brands in the luxury space, it's almost as if you're doing, how do we say, they're doing you a favor by allowing you to buy a product from them, which is a little bit like, that's, I don't think that's correct. Like, if you are spending money on something, if you're spending luxury money on a luxury product, be it a fragrance, be it a clothing item, be it accessories, you should be treated with respect as a customer when it comes to the stores, when it comes to the online experience, and when it comes to the overall aesthetic of the packaging and the experience. If you're paying niche pricing for a fragrance, you should be receiving a niche experience. And I think that goes that does transcend to in-person stores as well, because if you go into a store and you're considering buying a fragrance, you should not be profiled. You should not be profiled as someone who is more likely or less likely to buy something. You should be treated with respect because you are there to consider, or at least to introduce yourself to a brand that is expensive. And I do think that brands should make samples more available. I do think that brands should really cater to the customer. And it's not necessarily that the sales associates are in the wrong at this point, because the sales associates are supposed to hit a certain quota. So a lot of like big retailers, I'm talking about like Bergdorf's, Saks, and I've literally talked to people who work there, so like this is how I know. They're basically being told like you have to reach a certain quota with your sales, but they're not taking but the retailers are not taking into account the sales that they make online. So let's just say you are a consumer and you watched someone on social media talk about a fragrance, or let's just say you're a consumer and you walked into a Bergdorf's, a Saks, any one of these big stores. And I mean, let's just say Ulta and Sephora too, because they kind of like all are the same thing. Let's just say you are that person and you walked into that store and you tried a fragrance and you came back out, and let's just say you said, I don't really know if I want to buy the fragrance right now. I want to think about it. I want to wear it. I want to go home with it. Like, I want to, experience it. You go home and then you buy it online. That purchase is then not going to be counted to the store's quota. So again, let's just say you went to Saks and you tried a fragrance there. You came home. You're like, oh, I don't want to go back to Saks. you bought the fragrance online, that salesperson does not get any credit for it. And that I think speaks to more of like a structural issue. I do think that that's the reason why a lot of sales associates feel pressure to um, convert their customers. And I kind of empathize with that too, but I have been in situations where I've gone to a store and I've been like, you know what, I want to try all the fragrances. Do you have tester strips? No, we don't have tester strips. Okay. Um, can I try the fragrances? Yes, you can try the fragrances. I've literally tried the fragrances. I've smelled them for the first time. The sales associate comes to me. She's like, which one do you want to buy? I'm like, I haven't made the decision yet. Like, you can't expect me to buy a $300 fragrance and like feel like pressurize me into doing that. That's not going to happen. Like, I am happy to buy that if I think about it and if I decide that it's right for me. I'm not going to I'm not going to feel comfortable enough to buy it if I'm not delighted as a customer. And that might sound high maintenance, that might sound a certain way, but I do believe in customer delight. And I think that the consumer should be prioritized when it comes to the in-store experience. So the next thing is retailers should not rely on keynotes to sell fragrances. Again, this speaks to more of like a structural issue within the retail space, because a lot of stores, like, they will literally give you three notes to describe a fragrance, when in reality those three notes are just something that the marketing department cherry picked out of the fragrance pyramid, and wanted to share with the retailer. Often the retail associate is not given the proper training or the full look at the fragrance pyramid. So like, I remember one time I was literally at a Tom Ford counter, and the sales associate could only give me like a surface level overview of what a fragrance smelled like, because I was curious about trying one of their new scents. So she could only give me a surface level overview of what the fragrance smelled like. She did not have access to the scent pyramid. I pulled up Fragrantica, and she had never seen that before in her life. And she was like, this is amazing because I can use this to help sell product to my customers. Like, thank you so much for sharing this with me. And I'm thinking, if the retailers are so concerned and the brands are so concerned with selling product, why aren't you providing these resources to the associates to make it easy to sell the product? Because I remember working in retail, and I would say like, I what the fragrances that I sold, like, I would literally, like, I had Fragrantica pulled up, and I would just be like, okay, so like, this is the scent pyramid. In my head, I would be like, this is the scent pyramid for some of the more popular fragrances. And when I was selling fragrances to the customers, I'd be like, this fragrance has this note. And then they'd be like, no, it doesn't. On there, it says these three notes. And I had to explain to them what a scent pyramid was. And it was just like interesting. You know what would be cool? If there was some kind of like a QR code next to each fragrance display that you could scan and then get the note list. Because I do kind of understand retailers, like, with the display, like, you don't want to clutter up and overwhelm the customer with like a whole scent pyramid. But if a customer is already interested in a fragrance, having that full scent pyramid would help kind of paint a better picture of what the fragrance smells like. So I think that for each collection, or like for each brand, maybe like having like a QR code, or like maybe having a few QR codes that the customer can scan, select the fragrance, and then, see all the notes, that would actually be really helpful. And that would be more interactive. That would make it easier to sell the fragrances. Yeah, I'm coming up with a lot of interesting ideas, guys. But anyway, so the next thing is a fragrance should last. And I feel like this is going to be one of those more controversial ones in this video. I told you I would have some controversial ones. A lot of people online, and I'm talking about like fragrance creators, and this is no, like, this is in no way meant to criticize people that say this. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but I have seen a lot of people say, oh, like, if a fragrance doesn't last, it means you're not spraying on enough of it. Or if a fragrance doesn't last, it means you're not moisturizing. I have fragrances that, like, I have a fragrance that I just bought that I actually will be talking about. I don't know if that video is already up, but the Kayali Yum Bougie Marshmallow fragrance, I'm like literally in love with that scent. The only thing I don't like about it is that it's not that it doesn't last, it's just not powerful enough. Like, I will spray 3 sprays of it, And I know people can smell me, but I can't smell myself. And I'm not like calling out that fragrance because that fragrance in any way is like, you know, the only fragrance that does this. Like, there are a lot of other fragrances out there that just smell amazing, but they just don't last on my skin. Um, but I kind of like, I wish that more fragrances would be more powerful, because at the end of the day, if you're a creator and you're just telling someone to overspray or moisturize, I am moisturizing myself. Thank you very much. I am using moisturizer, but if I bought a fragrance with my own money, I don't know if I want to like spray like 20 sprays of it at a time, because that fragrance will go real quick. And yes, we can get into a whole other discussion about, oh yeah, are fragrances like, do we use up fragrances that quickly? Like, um a lot of people do not use up fragrances that quickly. Some people do. But I do think if you pay for a fragrance, like, it's kind of a little bit disheartening when if it doesn't last. I'll give you another example. Joe Malone Ginger Biscuit. I don't know what they were thinking when they launched that thing, but that's a cologne concentration. And yes, you can say it's Joe Malone. They're known for their lighter fragrances, but that fragrance is smells amazing, and it's expensive. It's like several $100s. It does not last. I don't know on who it'll last, and like, I guess the alternative to this is just spraying the fragrance on your clothes, but like, I don't know. It's kind of like a little bit disheartening when a fragrance doesn't last. Like, that's my personal thing. Like, I like fragrances that do last. I like fragrances that are like powerful, and maybe that's because I'm not as sensitive to fragrances as I'd like to be. I'd love to be able to smell fragrances better, but that's my opinion as a consumer. So the next thing is people should read up on the brand before reviewing it. So I'm gonna, how do I say this? I mean this in the best way possible. Like, please don't take this the wrong way, but I do think a lot of people, like, when they review a fragrance or when they have commentary on a fragrance, this is mostly directed at creators, they should kind of read up on the brand, like surface level, and understand why the fragrance they're talking about is what it is. So I'll give you an example. Kayali, you know, Kay Ali was started by Mona Katan because she was really fascinated by the Middle Eastern culture of layering different perfumes. And she essentially wanted to create a brand that merged East and West together, that merged Middle Eastern tradition with Western fragrances or Western style fragrances. And she put that together in a brand. And the fragrances that she created were meant to be layered with one another. That's why in every fragrance release video that you see she does, she gives you tips for layering the fragrances, because that's what the fragrance brand is supposed to be. Vanilla 28, every single time someone talks about Vanilla 28, they talk about how it's like a linear vanilla, not complex. They always have to layer it with something else. That's because it's meant to be layered with something else. And if you read up on the brand, you might know that, you know? And obviously, not everyone's obligated to read up on the brand before talking about it. And I do think a nice thing about the fragrance community online is how it's driven by your own personal experience. So you share an opinion based on your experience with a brand. Um, but I do think it would be helpful if more people kind of read up on a brand before critiquing something about it. With that being said, that's it for this video. This was a bit chattier than I anticipated. Honestly, this would probably have made a good podcast episode. I am working on creating more content for my podcast. Again, I'm releasing it once a week, every Wednesday. And I am having a lot of fun with it. So if you like these kind of chatty videos, check out my podcast, because I'm about to have some subject matter that's going to be exclusive to the podcast, things that you won't be able to see on my channel. And actually, while I'm starting out the podcast, I am going to be publishing parts of episodes on my YouTube channel, so you can definitely check them out as well. Right now, I'm releasing episodes of my podcast on this YouTube channel Thursdays, Fridays. So definitely subscribe if you want to see more of that. But that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.